quite a special show today. My guest today is Roy Dean of the Brazilian Jiu-jitsu world, where he holds a third-degree black belt, and he also holds several other black belts in other disciplines that I'll list in the interview in just a bit. As the title of this video suggests, this is an effort to get the attention of Joe Rogan of the Joe Rogan Experience, famed commentator for UFC and high-profile martial arts personality. A while back, he was talking on his Joe Rogan Experience podcast about fake martial arts, and one of his guests happened to be a practitioner of Aikido, and it didn't really go well for him. So that's not the best views Aikido has probably wanted out there, and that's the last taste of Aikido that was left in the mouths of listeners on that segment on the Joe Rogan podcast, and that clip of that can be found on YouTube. But recently Roy Dean made a video called An Open Letter to Joe Rogan, where Roy invites Joe Rogan to have him on the show. Roy has a deep background, Brazilian Jiu-jitsu and other martial arts, so he feels he can help better communicate the relevance of the art of Aikido today in light of the popularity of BJJ. Roy also has a black belt in Aikido, so if there's anybody qualified to have a knowledgeable and interesting discussion on the topic with Joe Rogan, it's Roy Dean. You're listening to the Edgar Ortega radio show. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just hit the subscribe button. Also find Edgar Ortega radio show on Facebook and on Instagram. Like and follow accordingly. One day I'll do a show about martial arts, and the next day I could be talking about snakes the whole time. I do a lot of shows on animals and wildlife, and I like Aikido and Brazilian Jiu-jitsu, so you get shows like that too. It's whatever I feel like doing. The video Roy put out sent quite a buzz in the Aikido world, at least on social networks. He didn't really release it in the BJJ circles, I don't think, if I remember from the interview. But hopefully some of you jiu-jitsu fans will get to hear his message for the first time. I included a link to the original video that we're going to be talking about that he put out. I'll put a link there in the description of this video. So if you want to pause and watch that video first to get a context for what this is about, you can do that in the description below. There are a lot of people that would love to go on the Joe Rogan podcast to straighten out a few things about Aikido, including Roy Dean. And Lenny Slack comes to mind. That'd be fun. And it'd be interesting. I'd love to get both Roy and Lenny on the show together. That'd be interesting, if not to have them on my little show here. People talk about the effectiveness and practicality in self-defense martial arts, and I think by the time you listen to the full interview here, I suspect it comes down to just why you train, how much you put into it, and how you train. If you want to talk about effectiveness, it just depends on why you're training and how you train. But I'll let you guys be the judges. So let's go now to my interview with Roy Dean. All right, Roy Dean has been training in martial arts for the past 25 years. He holds a third-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-jitsu under Professor Roy Harris, a black belt in Japanese Jiu-jitsu, a black belt in Judo, and a black belt in Aikido of the Aikikai flavor. He's best known for his instruction in Brazilian Jiu-jitsu, and he enjoys sharing the martial arts with the world. He operates the Roy Dean channel on YouTube, which has over 44,000 subscribers. He makes high-quality instructional videos and more that you can watch on his channel. Roy Dean, thanks so much for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me on, Edgar.
Yeah, no, it's really cool talking to you. I think you're the first BJJ guy I get to talk to, so I'm kind of excited about that.
Nice.
Now, you put out some high-quality videos, not only on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instruction, but also, motivation or documentary-style videos on your channel promoting the art. And I do three things in my online time. I watch videos about reptiles, I watch videos about Aikido, and I watch Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu videos. And admittedly, I just came across yours, and they're extremely well put together, high quality videos, and you do your own music for them, I understand. It's a whole production each time. Great stuff. Anyone who hasn't subscribed to Roy Dean's channel on YouTube needs to do that right away, especially if you're into martial arts or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You put out excellent content out there.
I appreciate that. It's definitely a labor of love.
Now, while messing around in both the Aikido and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world, I couldn't help but notice a huge a contrast in the types of people that, at least here in the U.S., that are attracted to each art. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but it's quite different. So you think, have you seen this, or maybe you disagree? What attracts people to Aikido versus BJJ, you think?
Well, although as jiu-jitsu has gotten more popular, the demographics are having a little bit more overlap. I would say that, just speaking very generally, the Aikido demographic tends to be older, tends to be a little bit more white collar, and it tends to be a touch more intellectual. And I think the people that discover Aikido usually read their way into the art. Mm-hmm. They go do research on different martial arts. Often the philosophy of Aikido sounds very promising and inspiring, to be able to redirect and neutralize your attacker without harming them. And I think that appeals to a wide base, but particularly people that might come into Aikido through research. Now, with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, although the demographics overlap more, most people see it as more athletic, more of a sport-oriented martial art.
Right.
And something when people are foremost interested in fighting effectiveness, they tend to go more for BJJ because they see it being demonstrated in things like the UFC or other mixed martial arts competitions.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's just kind of a side note. I wanted to bring that up. I mean, who trains in Aikido and who trains in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? We have kind of these different demographics, like you mentioned. And if we're going to understand one art over the other, it helps if we kind of know who we are a little bit. You recently put out a video titled "An Open Letter to Joe Rogan," I think on the future of Aikido. And I want to talk about your message there. But first, I mentioned your credentials as a martial artist. But go ahead and give me a more comprehensive explanation of your background in martial arts, so people understand that you're not just some guy with black belt in Aikido, that wants to talk about it. You have an extensive background. So go ahead and give us your expanded credentials to talk on this subject for those listening who may not have heard of you.
Well, my training began when I was 16. I was sent to Japan as an exchange student. And I began training judo. And judo over there is very much like American wrestling. So I joined the judo team, competed every month, ended up receiving my Shodan of first degree black belt by the end of the year through their competition system. I came back to the U.S. and continued my studies in Aikido, eventually deciding to get very serious about it. And I apprenticed myself to a Japanese jiu-jitsu and Aikido master in Monterey, California. Living in the dojo and starting a live-in student program, or Uchideshi program. Yeah. That I think over 50 people followed in my footsteps once that program was established. Because it's a really cool martial adventure. Let's just put it that way. And then after that, while I was still living in that dojo, I also was exposed to my first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu teacher, Claudio França. So I would travel from Monterey, California to Santa Cruz and train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And in those days, there weren't very many authentic Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu teachers. But Claudio was a real, legit Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and he was a Pan-American champion. So I received my blue belt under him. And then when I moved to San Diego, I continued my training in BJJ under Professor Roy Harris, who awarded me all my ranks through third degree black belt, where I currently sit. Additionally, I received my Shodan in Aikido under Julio Toribio, who I apprenticed to in Monterey, California. And essentially, the style of martial art that he taught was Seibukan Jiu-Jitsu. So Seibukan Jiu-Jitsu is a descendant of Hakuryu Jiu-Jitsu, which is a sister art of Aikido. Both came from Daitoryu Aiki Jiu-Jitsu. Mm-hmm. And so basically, I learned techniques that were taken out of the Aikido syllabus. Same lineage. So essentially, I feel that I have an understanding of Aikikai Aikido techniques and their training methodology. Techniques that were taken away from Aikido from its past through the Seibukan Jiu-Jitsu and Hakuryu Jiu-Jitsu. And I also have a real understanding of what it takes to develop a repeatable skill set and to be able to beat people that are much larger than you through Judo and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And the training methods of Judo and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, once you put enough time in, and if you're under competent instruction, you can really prove to yourself that the stuff works. It works very well. And all of these arts combined are just forms of jiu-jitsu. And even though BJJ people might be mocking Aikido these days, they should be careful, because Aikido is just an in vogue form of jiu-jitsu that has fallen out of favor. And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu could have the same fate awaiting them. Because as time goes on...
It's popular right now. Yeah.
It's popular, but, just careful what you mock, because as things go on, we've already seen a real evolution in the way the sport competition game in BJJ has changed versus its application toward mixed martial arts, versus now they're throwing in this kind of combat jiu-jitsu, open palm strike, kind of a new innovation by Eddie Bravo there. So it's going in these different directions, and just extend that another 30 years. And it's certainly possible that BJJ may lose sight of its original roots as a self-defense art and as a method of controlling distance very masterfully.
No, it's really interesting. It'd be interesting if after a while, the UFC becomes a somewhat I don't know. Who knows? It might be not as digestible by the public. Like when the samurai culture disappeared, jiu-jitsu wasn't as needed at the time anymore. So you never know what can happen. Now, in the video you put out, I want to specifically talk about that. You bring up one of Joe Rogan's guests, who I guess was representing Aikido. And I think I've seen the video. Is this the one where they're watching YouTube videos, finding Aikido versus other arts? Is that the video, and they're commenting on it?
Yes, yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and to his credit, he was on there as a neuroscientist,
right?
Talking about being addiction.
It was kind of a secondary thing.
Yeah, it was a secondary thing, and he did seem, he wasn't completely out of his element. He did describe some things accurately, but there were other things that were inaccurate. And also, his frame of reference wasn't as complete as, say, somebody like me who has been able to not just dip into the world of BJJ, but I've competed, I've won, I've lost, I have fought some very, very tough people. I fought people on steroids. I ran an academy for 8 years.
The other guy was on steroids.
And when you run an academy, you got to be the man. You have to be the man. And you have to find a way to adapt your technique and come out on top. And, once you're in that kind of crucible, being a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu professional or teaching seminars around the world, people test you. And I've wrestled with plenty of strong, tough, and very, very skilled individuals. So I understand what it takes to actually be effective, whether that's with Judo, BJJ, or Aikido. And I really feel that Aikido would benefit enormously from doing a full embrace of the training methods that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu adopt so
Yeah.
successfully.
Yeah, I kind of want to bring that up later. I think a lot of Aikido maybe were frustrated by those who've seen the segment, especially as it was lumped in with kind of the topic of Hoki martial arts. But with your background, I think you'd be best suited to discuss Aikido or the future of Aikido with a high profile personality like Joe Rogan, because you'd be able to make connections with mutual love and knowledge for martial arts, particularly in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I think with that background, you'd certainly be better suited to discuss Aikido with him. I think that would be quite interesting to hear. I'd love to hear that myself. So tell us here. I mean, if you put your video out, and we'll put a link of it in the description of this video. I think if you throw enough darts, eventually you're going to hit the bullseye, right? So let's put this out there again. As an accomplished martial artist who has the background in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and other arts, and deeply familiar with the art of Aikido, what is your message to Joe Rogan specifically on Aikido, and why does Roy Dean want to be a guest on the Joe Rogan Experience?
Because he's a lover of jiu-jitsu. And I'm a lover of jiu-jitsu.
And you talked about roots.
And jiu-jitsu is the parent art. It's the perennial art. It is the art that adds so much to so many people's lives. And whatever form jiu-jitsu happens to appear in a society, jiu-jitsu will adapt to serve the needs of the society. So if you need jiu-jitsu to be able to off-balance somebody in body armor, jiu-jitsu can take care of it. If you need leverage techniques to be able to prevent somebody from drawing their sword, jiu-jitsu can find a way. If you need to understand how to deal with multiple opponents or a single opponent in a one-on-one situation, jiu-jitsu has the answer. But as we separate these different arts, whether we call it Japanese jiu-jitsu, BJJ, Aikido, and many Aikidoists do not feel like they're actually representing a form of jiu-jitsu. Many Aikidoists actually feel that they're more evolved than jiu-jitsu. And jiu-jitsu is almost like a little bit dirty. But what we're aiming for is a more complete understanding of what jiu-jitsu is, and not letting those techniques die. Because whether we are using those techniques now or some of the historical techniques that are, for example, only represented in Kodokan Judo kata, like the self-defense kata. A lot of those were preserved for a reason. It's to enhance our understanding of leverage, timing, angles, distraction, all the facets of jiu-jitsu that make the art so effective and so incredible. So by preserving the past, we also help have a more informed perspective on the present, and we can also help shape a better future.
So, you mentioned Aikido and the Jiu-Jitsu, of course, being the roots of Aikido. Do you see Aikido as antiquated?
No, not at all.
Right. And so, how is it? How do you see it as applicable? People talk about effectiveness and this and that. I think I saw your video on Vimeo or that channel. Did you upload it to YouTube too, or just on there?
That was actually just done by Aikido Journal. I didn't personally publish that, but I was talking with Josh Gold after the passing of Stanley Pranin, and I felt moved to create that video. Stanley Pranin was founder of Aikido Journal, martial arts historian. He really did a lot for the martial arts, not only Aikido. Without him, people wouldn't know about Daitoryu Aiki Jiu-Jitsu, or it would be at most a footnote. But, he brought a lot of attention to personalities that were involved in these arts. For example, without him, I probably would not have known about Mochizuki. Now, Mochizuki was like the original cross-trained martial artist. He was the only man to receive his black belt from the three Japanese founders of Budo, the great masters. So he got his black belt from Gichin Funakoshi in karate. He received his black belt from Jigoro Kano, and he received his black belt from Morihei Ueshiba. And he founded his own Aikido system, Yoseikan. So it's not as popular as, say, Aikikai or Yoshinkan or some of these other styles, but, you know, I mean, just knowing about him, learning about him, and his approach to Aikido. He saw Aikido in all things. Aikido could apply to weapons. Aikido could apply to missiles. Aikido could apply to hand versus a bayonet. Aikido was in all things, and he was an inspiration for me to cross-train and further my own development. And I just think that needs to be promulgated through the martial arts community, through the Aikido community, and also get that message out to the jiu-jitsu guys that, you know, might be sitting there thinking, no, we got the best stuff. No, you know, keep an open mind. Continue to train. Continue to cross-train, and you might even get that extra edge and discover that technique that gives you an edge in competition that you wouldn't be able to get to ordinarily studying the same things everyone else does.
It's also important to study the history of the martial art. I mean, you could study the art itself, but you know where it came from. That could be a big thing. I think that's one of the things you're talking about. In your video message to Joe Rogan, you also address the Aikido world. At least that's how I took it. I mean, recently he passed away, and he's known through his work with the Aikido Journal, and is actually what prompted you to make the video, it sounded like. But as you said, it addresses the Aikido world in that you say that the art of Aikido is dying. You said that you feel that with the passing of each master, we could see Aikido becoming more, I think you said, diluted. So talk about that, and what is it that needs to be done to preserve the art?
So yeah, definitely two close words there. Diluted versus diluted. So more watered down. I think that's a natural consequence as you step away from with each passing generation. I think that happens. The way the art gets reinvigorated is through rediscovering effectiveness for yourself. And how do you do that? Well, you do that through adopting training methods that allow you to fail and see where the shortcomings are in your technique. And if you, number one, encourage that.
Well, jiu-jitsu does that for sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You're failing for months and months before you get in.
And how satisfying, Edgar, how satisfying is it when you land a technique on somebody and you know they did not want you to get that technique?
All right.
So that is something where you don't have to revert to any kind of intellectual argument of, well, the masters were training this way back then, or training was so severe, or in a real life situation they would have attacked me differently, or whatever kind of intellectual crutch you want to just rest on. You know through direct experience that the technique you did worked in jiu-jitsu. Yeah. So I'm just proposing that Aikido, and not just take a tepid step into the waters of playing around with jiu-jitsu, but I think they need to re-embrace jiu-jitsu and kind of understand those angles in between. Now, if I can talk just a little bit about Aikido and whether it's effective or not. Like, you've trained in Aikido, haven't you, Edgar?
Yeah, I'm still a Q student. I'm a beginner in BJJ, but I have kind of a window into that, so I've really been enjoying both.
Both are beautiful arts. I think they're sister arts, and I feel that their approaches are complementary. And the benefits extend beyond just the technical syllabus that each one contains. I feel that Aikido has a training method that would benefit BJJ, and BJJ has a training method that would benefit Aikido. I think there's a symbiotic relationship that's waiting to be explored. But when your instructor does an Aikido technique on you, for example, he gets you in an Ikkyo and he takes you to the ground, it feels real. It feels effective, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's because it is real and it is effective.
Yeah, that's something I want to bring up. I mean, you talked about in your video the arts. We're talking about effectiveness. I'll let you get back to this, but you talked about ranges of effectiveness. Now, I want to talk about how each art kind of trains. This is just my view, and you can jump in and tell me what you think. Now, in recent months, I've been dabbling a little bit in Brazilian jiu-jitsu training, and there's certainly a huge difference in how the training is done. In Aikido, you're training in technique over and over, but you don't really go at it full force. I mean, in most Aikido dojos, there's no sparring. I mean, rather, there's these simulated attacks that we do. So the closest thing to sparring, or real training that we would do in an Aikido dojo are these simulated attacks and attempting to perfect the application, timing, angles, that sort of thing, and technique. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you learn a technique in the same way, or the coach shows it to you, then you pair up and you practice that technique, with little resistance, just so you get the technique down, similar to the structure of an Aikido class. But then you go into sparring, where you get you're quite literally fighting with somebody who's attempting to either submit you or choke you out, so you really get a chance to try and apply the technique, like you said, and it's really satisfying when you are able to apply it in a real situation, whatever you want to call it, and you've learned it, and your opponent's genuinely attacking you. Not something you see in Aikido dojos, I mean, with the exception of perhaps the Tenshin guys who really emphasize sincere attacks, but, it only goes so far. So talk about that. I mean, continue talking about what you're saying, but the training certainly is different to how we get there. Or maybe how we perceive effectiveness.
It is, and I struggled with that because, I read myself into Aikido. I was a judo black belt, but I wanted to fight like Steven Seagal.
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to handle, multiple attackers.
Yeah.
I wanted to do all that stuff.
Right.
I wanted it to look like when I fight.
The beginnings of it. That's how
I want it to look like that, right?
Yeah.
Who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want that?
I think a few people got in for that reason.
So when I understood how many repetitions through judo. I understood how many repetitions it took in order to be able to do a throw in a live situation. You have to deeply program your body in order to do that.
Reflexes too, yeah.
Absolutely. Muscle memory, neuromuscular patterns. Okay. So but then when I trained in Aikido and I would go against somebody who didn't do Aikido, but they wrestled, it was a disconnect. I was like, what's going on here? Why is this not working? It's not like I wasn't training hard in Aikido. I was very dedicated. I read everything there was to know about it. And, I was pretty convinced that this was a martial art. I needed to do something else. I needed to do something additional because what I was doing by just showing up to the dojo and sincerely training was not adding up. Okay. Now, my cross-training ambitions were not widely supported. But
by your Aikido people?
They just kind of looked at me like,
sure.
He's young,
Well, there's that philosophy there of avoiding the fighting and all that. And, of course, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you kind of can't help it.
Right. And I understand how Morihei Ueshiba, founder of Aikido, he wanted a different path. He wanted a path of reconciliation. And certainly that is ideal, to be able to have somebody attack you and to be so adept with your techniques that you can just redirect them. You don't have to, you have the different stages of levels of compassion. You can destroy somebody. You can kill somebody. You can incapacitate somebody. You can maim somebody. You can hurt them, but then not maim them, but still come out victorious. Or at the highest level, you'll be able to emerge victorious, but leave them unharmed. And they talk about that for example, in Aikido in the dynamic sphere. So yeah, wouldn't that be great if you could do that?
Yeah.
And the thing is, in BJJ, you can do that. You can. You just need to train long enough in order to do that. So the philosophy of Aikido could be applied through the art of BJJ. You just need to get sufficiently skilled And I feel it myself. I feel it, at the level that I'm at now, where I can have some people attack me and I can have them laughing at the end because you take their balance, you sweep them, you submit them, and they're like, dude, that was amazing. Yeah. You make it fun, and that is a level that Morihei Ueshiba was at with his Aikido jiu-jitsu. He was at a level where he could do it with just, he knew when the attacks were coming, or he would initiate the attack. So, of course, then he really does know the timing. You don't have to wait or rely on visual acuity for that attack to come in. He would initiate the attack. The person would respond. He tracks that response and redirects them. So the training method that you get in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I think would deeply, deeply enhance the Aikido experience. Now, integrating those two, that's going to be difficult. That's going to take time. That's new. Synergy is not necessarily painless, but I think there's something rich waiting to be discovered with this synergy between Aikido and BJJ.
That's really interesting. I mean, you see you mentioned people in the BJJ circles kind of mocking Aikido. In your video, you mentioned Kenjin Tomiki. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Kenji Tomiki was a Kokan judo master. He was one of the great students of Jigoro Kano. And he was also an educator. He promoted judo all over the world. And he had fought most every judo and jiu-jitsu man in Japan by that time. Everyone of really, really high skill, except Morihei Ueshiba, or O-sensei. So he and his friends were like, dude, we're not going to beat up that old man, But eventually he went down and did challenge him. He attacked him. He didn't understand how he was thrown to the other end of the room, but he did. He said one more time, and then he asked to become a student because he didn't understand what had happened to him. And so obviously O-sensei's jiu-jitsu was at a very, very high level where he could, feel when the guy was coming in and be able to redirect it. And Tomiki wanted to understand that. He called Aikido separated judo. And he ended up founding his own system, which introduced a competitive aspect to Aikido. With points, and they have like a tanto competition aspect of it as well. Tanto being a knife. And that was his solution. That was his way of integrating the best of competition with the best of these separated judo techniques. It was fairly successful, although it's not the most popular form of Aikido to emerge out of Japan.
Right, certainly because of the non-competition aspect of it.
Yeah, and many other Aikido schools might look actually down on that, saying, well, they do their thing, but we don't do that. We don't compete. It's kind of looking down on it. When in fact, competition is the thing that will pressure test your technique. And pressure testing your technique. Of course, you don't have to pressure test your technique just in competition. To be able to pressure test your technique in regular training. And now, back to your point about this huge disparity in training methods between Aikido and BJJ, right? You never spar in Aikido. You spar every class in BJJ. Now, Seibukan Jiu-Jitsu had kind of a middle ground that they call Tai Sabaki and Henka. So, in Aikido, you have pre-arranged attacks, pre-arranged responses, and, eventually you get to a more improvisational stage. In Seibukan Jiu-Jitsu, they kind of insert a middle ground where you don't know the attack that's going to come, and yet you have to respond spontaneously to that.
Kind of like the Jiawaza in Aikido is kind of a bit.
Yes, Jiawaza is very much like that. Very much like that. Yet it's still a little bit more constrained. Like you don't know which, but it's going to be one of four attacks.
Yeah, sure. You're not going to get tackled.
Yeah. Where Seibukan has much more, creative freedom. And in, and studying under Roy Harris, who's a truly amazing martial artist, so deep in his knowledge. He is the one who really introduced me. I remember asking him about Aikido. I was like, so what do you think when I first started training with him? He said, Aikido's great. It's training method, not techniques, Roy. Training method. And that is the truth. That's the bottom line. It's training method, So he opened my eyes to the fact that there could be other forms of training. Like, for example, you have kata. No resistance. You're just learning, hey, just let me trace out the shape of the technique here, man. Don't resist me. Okay.
All right.
Then people can introduce resistance, but resistance can take many forms. You can just stiffen up and you're resisting. So they have to kind of work through the motion with a little bit more whole body integration. Or they can resist in a specific way. Maybe they release their grip and then reattack. You can define those parameters. And then you scale a progression so that you can go live and be able to work your techniques. Where live is only like 15% more than drilling with resistance. So it's not this huge gap that is insurmountable. You've been building toward it. It's a progression.
It's interesting, kind of like even when you're rolling in the gym, may not be the same as the guy coming at you 200% in competition, maybe, and I guess it's how you train.
Exactly. Now, just imagine you do techniques in class, you never spar, but then you go to a competition.
Huh?
It's too much to ask.
Yeah, I guess that's what you're comparing, isn't it?
It's too much to ask. So to expect somebody who's done Aikido for a long time and is very well versed in the particular vectors of attack that they respond to, then, to be able to have them defend themselves adequately in a situation where, people aren't attacking in those vectors. They're doing something different. They're doing something way different that you've never even seen before. And that could be a double leg. That could be, grabbing you in a way that you're grabbed with on one or two wrists all the time in Aikido. But, you never know. They might grab you in some unfamiliar way or grab your hair or grab your jacket, How do you deal with that stuff? It's just too much of an ask to ask somebody to do that without having any kind of graduated resistance in between to protect them.
And I guess if you want to train that way, you can. You might have to do it outside the dojo, with other students who are interested in that sort of thing. But it's all in how you train, like you said. I've seen you do a video. I think you combined Aikido with some jiu-jitsu. I think you're doing like a Shiho Nage, and the guy rolled out of it, and then you rolled into some jiu-jitsu stuff. Yeah, what was that about?
So that was, I did a series of seminars in Chicago at Kikumatsu Dojo.
Yeah, it looked like you were in an Aikido dojo.
Yeah, it was an Aikido dojo, and I wanted to show, both of those were filmed. One was called a BJJ crash course for Aikido players, and the other is countering jiu-jitsu. So I gave, on a very basic level, I showed them in the first seminar, the crash course, basic jiu-jitsu techniques, and then how to combine those with Aikido techniques. For example, you do a Shihonage, you do a Kotegaishi, and the person goes down. But what if they spin out? What if they spin out and go to their knees? Well, that's where I show dropping your chest on their back, falling into a Darce choke. Those two techniques combined very, very well.
Well, with jiu-jitsu, or with Aikido, you do a technique, boom, it's over. You're not used to continuing with the flow of it necessarily. Other than get up, you go down, get up. But with jiu-jitsu, I guess you're doing that all the time, because not only are you concentrating on technique, you got to anticipate what they're going to do after that and be ready for that.
Yes.
2 or 3 moves ahead.
And you need, and this is kind of getting to the heart of the matter. To be effective in jiu-jitsu, to really be able to tap somebody out at the kind of at-will grappling stage, like a brown belt, like a good brown belt or a black belt, you need to be able to circle back to your attack. For example, you take somebody down, you pass their guard, you mount them, you go for an arm lock. They're defending the arm lock, so you switch to a choke, and then you go back again. Then you go back to the arm lock. They're defending the choke. You go back to the arm lock, you go back to the choke, arm lock, choke, arm lock, choke. Maybe you throw something else in there. You attack the wrist, then you're back to the choke. You need to be able to bring it back to your area of expertise, where you are best trained and comfortable, and where your programming is.
So the Aikido guy shouldn't use jiu-jitsu on the jiu-jitsu guy.
No, well, I think it's more of the Aikido person has an attack coming in, and then if they don't get it in that one moment, they're lost.
Yeah.
So what Aikido needs to do is be able to work back to their specific range and have that guy come in again with that same attack. And there are ways you can lead people into looping into the same pattern. So in order to tap somebody, you need to be able to control those parameters. You need to be able to open some doors and close others, right? The issue with Aikido is if you don't off-balance them right away, if you don't get your groove on immediately with your preferred technique, then you are out of your element. You missed your opportunity. And a more graduated training method would allow students to find pockets to either create space and have the person come in with another attack, or you attack to have the person respond, and then you're able to take their energy.
Yeah, you do that in judo. You want to get a reaction so you can do a throw.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. So so you made the. I'd love to talk to you about Aikido and combining it with BJJ. And the reason I took it is because I'm legally blind. I can see right in front of me, but my peripheral's all gone. So in Aikido, sometimes I'll miss a showman to my head or something, as I won't see it coming. But in jiu-jitsu, you could probably do it with your eyes closed, at least from my gather, once you get skilled enough, because you kind of do it by feel. You could do it that way. So that's one reason I did it. Also in Aikido, it's a standing art. There's some stuff that could be done on the ground, but not really compared to jiu-jitsu. So you talk about cross training. A lot of arts are stand-up only, and they have nothing on the ground. I think that's what the Gracies took advantage of when they got this going, when they did the Gracie Challenge and started inviting people to fight them. And, the Kung Fu guys, undefeated, karate guys, everybody, they took on everybody because the floor is a totally foreign place for them. So you get a more complete education in martial arts and fighting and defending yourself if you cross-train, which you encourage. Is that correct?
Oh, huge. And just knowing a few basics in that realm. Yeah. If you don't, let's think about why it's difficult to be on the ground. Because on your feet, what are your friction points? What are you in contact with the ground?
It's your feet.
Just your feet. Yeah. Just your feet. Not that much body surface, right?
No.
And even if somebody grabs you, they're grabbing you. They're not pinning you from the front and the back. Whereas if you are on your back on the ground, 50% of your movement options are gone.
Yeah, you're squat.
You cannot move behind you.
Yeah.
Your movement options now include a lot of friction with your body on the ground. Mm-hmm. Then you combine somebody's body weight on top of you. So now you're pinned. And there are methods of escaping, obviously, but when it comes right down to it, that's just too much to ask for somebody to figure out in the moment.
Who's used to having space.
Who's used to having space and doesn't know how to lift their hips and overcome the friction of the ground, right? By just having the contact point be your shoulder and your foot, which is what you do in like any kind of shrimping movement.
Right, or building a frame or something like that. Yeah. No, now, you made this video. I'd love to talk all day about this, but when I go back to the video, what kind of response did you get from it? Both from the Aikido, and I don't know if you would have gotten a response from the Jiu-Jitsu people.
I did not promote this at all myself.
Right. Oh,
so I
right,
didn't put it out to any of the jiu-jitsu community. It was only promoted on Aikido Journal, and it provoked a huge response. Huge. All over the world.
From the Aikido people.
But hundreds and hundreds of comments, and some of them quite, many of them in agreement. Something needs to be done. We should do something. Finally, somebody's speaking up. I received a number of private messages. I'm here. I got your back fully, man. You're speaking the truth. That's great to hear. Keep up the good fight. So did Josh Gold. He received a number of messages as well, privately, as well as Aikido Journal, and at Ikazuchi Dojo, which is the Aikido, the very progressive Aikido school that he runs with Matsuoka Sensei in Los Angeles.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's an interesting response. I mean, were you said you were inspired by, of course, you felt compelled by the death of Stanley Pranin to make this. Was the dojo or yourself, have you seen more of a progression towards this to kind of get Aikido out there more, I don't know if more respected by the BJJ community or anything? Was there anybody else's work that kind of led you to here? And was Stanley Pranin kind of the thing that pushed it over, or was it just from him passing away, and then you were afraid that we'd lose our roots, like you said? Or was there, other people kind of pushing this?
Over the years, many people have contacted me and said that they would love to see me on the Joe Rogan podcast talking to him about Aikido, because I was one of the few qualified resources that could really understand him and put it in his terms, and even frame specific Aikido techniques in terms of their BJJ equivalent.
That'd be interesting to hear. Yeah,
I can absolutely do that. I can talk. I'm fluent in multiple languages in terms of jiu-jitsu. Now, when it comes to the passing of Stanley Pranin and also the passing of Chiba Sensei, Kazuo Chiba, both of those guys, and there have been a number of other Aikido instructors over the last couple of years. That generation is passing away, and what's going to happen to the art? And I'm not really amazed with the trajectory it's taking. I left Aikido a long time ago it was actually at the last Aiki Expo, which was a big exposition in Los Angeles. Stanley Pranin put that on. I did some filming for it, and I had a choice between doing the Aiki Expo and going to see the ADCC championships during the year when Marcelo Garcia won and Roger Gracie emerged as family champion. Okay. So that was a real pivotal point for me, because I went to the Aiki Expo and it was my last stand in that world. I said, you know what, that's the past. Because I just didn't feel that the mojo was with that. I just didn't feel the vitality was with the submission grappling. I felt like, okay, it felt clear to me that that's the past, and I just went with submission grappling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, modern Jiu-Jitsu. Now, I have enough experience now to be able to give something back to the Aikido community, and to be able to, I've met so many great martial artists through Aikido, and I don't like that art being vilified. I don't like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu being called like monkey wrestling. It is a very sophisticated, technical martial art that takes a high level of dedication to become proficient at.
It's highly complex, even compared to Aikido. I mean, you have a handful of techniques in Aikido, but you have hundreds of jiu-jitsu techniques that take a lifetime to get close to mastering.
Absolutely. And I had the good fortune of having Josh Gold out here this last weekend. He came out, and I got him curious. He had never really felt Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I said, come on out, man. I'll introduce you to the art the right way. He came out. We did some training. He loved it. He was amazed at a couple of different things. Number one, how disoriented he was during specific, he's not sure how to move on the ground. He was in some positions where his spatial orientation wasn't as adept as it is standing in his world.
Right.
He was surprised at his level of disorientation. Number two, he was surprised at how adept I was with my legs. The level of coordination you need, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, particularly once you get to like purple belt level, you need to be using your legs like your arms. And he thought my Jiu-Jitsu felt like Aikido. Smooth, powerful, but really, really controlled.
There's that flow there that you eventually get to at some level of jiu-jitsu, I guess in the higher belt levels. Where you guys do, free rolling where you're just kind of rolling, and it looks really, you can consider it a little bit like Aikido. You're in that flow.
It's exactly like Aikido.
Yeah.
There's no difference between that and Aikido. You're flowing. Yeah. You're doing, but there you're sparring in a different manner. You can spar, combatively, creatively, cooperatively.
You're redirecting energy.
Competitively, to quote my teacher. And, those free rolls, it's more playful. Maybe you experiment a little bit, you get caught, whatever. It's no big deal. You're warming up, you're exploring movement, you're gaining sensitivity. That is a progressive form of training, that will help you when you go into the full resistance form of training.
Yeah, in the spirit of building bridges between the arts, or at least between the practitioners of the arts, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, let's do Aikido. You could get your Shodan in 3 to 5 years, right? But in the Jiu-Jitsu, you're looking at 10 years if you train nonstop, right?
It depends. Yeah. It depends on the number of obligations you have in your life. Now, to get really good at jiu-jitsu, you have to become obsessed for a period of time.
Right.
Yeah, for a little while, you will get obsessed, and that's totally okay. You need that for a while, but it can range anywhere. Black belt could be, 6 years to 12 years. That's kind of like the modern time frame. Some people, if they're young, they're supported, or they don't have to worry about, other bills. They can dedicate themselves to it fully, 100%. Mm-hmm. You can progress pretty quickly. You can get good in jiu-jitsu if you're really dedicated and you have a great teacher in 3 years. But to really achieve that level of proficiency, like black belt level, it takes time. I was just reading a quote from Art of Peace from Ortega, where he was saying, 10 years is the basics in any art.
Yeah.
You just don't expect mastery. You're working on the basics for the first 10 years. And I feel that's very, very true for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
And on the other side, if those who haven't experienced Aikido, you're not in that kind of confined bubble, and you have to work with space, which you may not as much be used to, but you have to work on timing, the techniques, of course,
footwork,
as well as the footwork, and being off your back, I guess you could say, and the timing and the way to blend and roll with those people in a smooth way, like you do in jiu-jitsu. It takes a whole nother set of training standards, and it's something to get to in your Aikido training.
Absolutely, and if I may add, I feel that Aikido is, and people always ask me, hey, your jiu-jitsu so beautiful, your jiu-jitsu so flowing. How did that happen? How do you get that?
Did you say Aikido?
Yeah. It's true. Yeah. It's true. Even my teacher says he had that when he came to me. And what was that from? That was from Aikido. That was from the training method that allowed me how to learn how to blend. And in BJJ, it's not all about power. It's not all about athleticism. Yeah. It's about blending. And the more you can blend, the more skillfully you can blend, then the smoother and more beautiful your jiu-jitsu will be.
Have you gotten, when you roll with another black belt, have you gotten comments like something different? Something different with you?
Oh, yeah.
And that's what you say. You mentioned the Aikido. I I mean, I've done very little of it, but I'm just in the beginning stages of it. But I can see where you can kind of take advantage of the energy going one way, and you see it coming another way, and the person would be kind of surprised by you anticipating that sort of thing. So it'd be interesting to hear somebody talk who's rolled with you.
Oh, well, I don't know. Maybe Josh Gold should be the next guest.
Oh, no, we'll see. Now, the goal of that, I mean, did you ever actually contact the Joe Rogan Experience, or did anybody do that? You guys had a link on the article that put out, or maybe they put it up for you.
To contact his production assistant.
Did you have anything to do with that, or did people do that?
Oh, a number of people wrote, but I haven't heard from them directly, so the ball is in their court. I just wanted to put it up there and say that I would love to have that conversation. And if he would like to invite me on, I would love to be a guest. And I think we would have a really engaging conversation about Aikido, jiu-jitsu, and a number of other topics as well.
I think that would bring a lot of people together listening to the same show, to those interested in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And, of course, the Aikido world would love to listen to that. Aikido people love their YouTube videos, so do BJJ people.
For sure.
So hopefully this will put another dart being thrown at the bullseye. Maybe we'll hit it and get the attention of Joe Rogan, who loves martial arts, not just Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I think he did Taekwondo and other stuff, too. So we'll see what happens. I hope that you can get a spot with him, and that you can speak with them, and I would love to hear that conversation, just out of, if nothing else, out of interest in the martial arts. Yeah.
Fantastic. That is definitely the aim. I'm a martial arts lover. I'm a martial artist who, eventually I learned how to fight. I'm not a fighter. I'm a martial artist. Joe is a true martial artist as well. And you can tell in his commentary of the UFC, his appreciation of the composite arts that form modern day MMA. And he's done a great service to martial arts by being an enthusiastic fan and educator. And I would like to just be a small part in that conversation.
It's very cool. We'd love to see that. Roy, thank you for what you're doing and try to bring these, the people in the two disciplines together. I appreciate you coming on the program to talk about this. Hopefully we'll see you on the Joe Rogan podcast. Who knows?
I look forward to that day, and I appreciate you having me on.
All right. Thank you to Roy Dean for coming on the show to talk with me. Fascinating discussion with him. He is talented and obviously highly intelligent. That was good stuff. But go ahead and let me know what you thought of the show in a comment below. Give the video a like, and be sure to follow Edgar Ortega. That's one word, on YouTube. And hopefully Roy will get an invite to the Joe Rogan Experience. That would be an excellent discussion to experience. If you want to watch the original video that led to this interview that we talked about in the show, there's a link in the description to this video, and there you can find where you can email the Joe Rogan podcast asking them to invite Roy Dean to the show and take another shot at a great discussion on Aikido. That'd be a great thing to see. It'd be great if Roy got on the show. As always, thank you again. You've been listening to the Edgar Ortega Radio Show.